June 27, 1984. A seemingly ordinary Wednesday in the small town of Nova Cana do Norte, in the interior of Mato Grosso. The sky was clear. The temperature was 20 degrees Celsius, typical of the region's dry winter. The couple Roberto Cardoso, 38, and Helena Cardoso, 35, left their home around 7:30 in the morning. They had moved to the region only 2 years earlier, drawn by the promises of prosperity on the agricultural frontier that was advancing through Brazil's Midwest. Roberto was an agronomist and managed a small 50-hectare property where he mainly cultivated soybeans. Helena, a biology teacher, had secured a position at the only state school in town. The couple had no children. They lived in a simple house 12 kilometers from the town center, along a dirt road that cut through vast fields and rural properties. That morning, according to neighbors' later accounts, Roberto and Helena left in their blue 1982 Ford F-1000 pickup truck. Their declared destination was a meeting with representatives of an agricultural cooperative in Sinop, a larger city located 116 kilometers away. The road connecting the two towns was precarious, made of packed earth, surrounded by dense cerrado vegetation and small transition areas toward the Amazon. The alarm over the couple's disappearance was only raised 2 days later, on June 29th, when Helena failed to attend an important school meeting where she was supposed to present the semester's plan. Concerned about her absence, the school principal, Carlos Mendonça, tried calling the Cardoso's residence several times without success. That same day, he attempted to reach Roberto through the local cooperative, only to be told that the agronomist had also missed the scheduled appointments. They were extremely responsible. They never missed commitments without notifying in advance, Carlos later told the police. When I learned that both were missing, I immediately realized something serious had happened. On June 30th, the school principal, accompanied by 2 employees from the agricultural cooperative, went to the couple's house. They found the gate unlocked, the pets, 2 dogs and a cat, without food or water, seemingly abandoned for days. Inside the house, everything appeared in order, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. On the kitchen table, a half-finished cup of coffee and a plate with bread remnants suggested they had had a quick breakfast before leaving. The police were immediately called. Chief Arnaldo Pereira, head of the small local station with only 4 officers, began searching the area. The couple's truck was not at the property, which initially led to the suspicion that they might have been involved in an accident on the road to Sinop. The first 72 hours were spent covering the entire stretch of the road, including side paths leading to farms and trails. No trace of the vehicle or the couple was found. "We knew that region was dangerous," the chief wrote in his initial report. There were records of robberies against drivers traveling alone, especially on more isolated sections of the road. But for a couple to vanish completely, leaving no trace, was unprecedented and deeply concerning. If you want to follow more cases like this, cases that move society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. The first weeks of the investigation focused on 3 main lines: an accident on a road, robbery followed by homicide, or voluntary disappearance. The latter hypothesis was quickly dismissed once the couple's bank accounts were checked and found untouched. Moreover, their personal documents, such as passports, were found at home. Police in Sinop confirmed that Roberto had scheduled a meeting with the agricultural cooperative on June 27th at 2 p.m., but he never showed up or contacted anyone to cancel. None of the cooperative's employees had additional information about possible problems the agronomist might have faced. On July 15, 1984, the investigation gained a new element when Antonio Silveira, a farm worker from a neighboring property, reported having seen the couple's truck on the morning of the disappearance, around 8:20. According to a statement, the vehicle was traveling normally along the main road, but was followed closely by a white Toyota Bandiran pickup truck, with at least 2 men inside. "I thought it was strange because the white truck was driving very close to Mr. Roberto's, almost touching the rear," Antonio declared. "I assumed they knew each other, maybe heading together to some farmers' meeting, but now that I know about the disappearance, I remembered this detail." Based on this testimony, police intensified their search for information about the white pickup. They checked vehicle records in the region, questioned owners, and visited local repair shops. Despite these efforts, no solid lead emerged. In August 1984, the investigation suffered a major setback when heavy flooding destroyed large stretches of the road between Nova Canad do Norte and Sinop, possibly washing away evidence that might have been present along the way. At the same time, investigators began to look into potential conflicts involving the couple. They discovered that Roberto had clashed with a major landowner in the region, Augusto Mendez, over rights of passage on a rural road and the use of a stream that crossed both properties. Witnesses reported that their disputes had intensified in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. A worker from Mendez property stated, under anonymity, that his employer had made veiled threats against Roberto during a meeting at the local cooperative. Augusto Mendez was interrogated twice by the police. On both occasions, he vehemently denied any involvement in the disappearance, presenting an alibi for June 27 confirmed by several of his farm employees and by records of a meeting at the Sinop City Hall, where he had been present all afternoon. Another aspect investigated was Helena Cardoso's recent approval in a competitive exam for a permanent teaching position in the state school system. According to colleagues, her appointment had generated resentment among some local teachers who had been expecting the position. However, no concrete evidence linked this fact to the disappearance. By the end of 1984, more than 50 people had been interviewed, including neighbors, co-workers, local shopkeepers, and drivers who frequently used the road between the two towns. The couple's pickup truck was never located, even after searches were extended to neighboring municipalities and scrapyards in the region. The lack of resources at the small local police station and the logistical difficulties of investigating such a vast and isolated area began to hinder the progress of the case. In December 1984, Chief Arnaldo Pereira requested support from the federal police, considering the possibility that the couple might have been taken to another state or even to neighboring countries, such as Bolivia or Paraguay, both relatively close to the region. In January 1985, the investigation took on a new dimension when Jose Ferreira, an employee of the agricultural cooperative, reported a previously unknown detail. Roberto had mentioned, weeks before the disappearance, that he had discovered something strange in a remote area of his property and was investigating the matter discreetly. The years went by, and the case of the Cardoso couple became one of the most mysterious in Brazil's Midwest. The official investigation gradually lost strength, reduced to occasional checks of possible sightings and cross-referencing data with other disappearances. In 1987, the couple's property was formally transferred to Roberto's sister, Marta Cardoso, who decided to sell it to a group of agricultural investors. The house remained abandoned for years until it was demolished in 1990 to make way for new storage warehouses. For nearly 2 decades, the case remained practically forgotten in police archives, surfacing only occasionally in conversations among the older residents of Nova Canad do Norte. Meanwhile, the region was radically transformed by the expansion of agribusiness, the arrival of new technologies, and population growth. It was only in 2005 that a new element emerged, when a state newspaper feature on unsolved cases in Mato Grosso reignited interest in the Cardoso disappearance. Family members, especially Marta, Roberto's sister, pressured authorities to reopen the case, arguing that new investigative techniques could bring answers. In response to family and media pressure, the Mato Grosso Civil Police appointed Chief Marcelo Andrade to reassess the case. He began a full review of testimonies and evidence, now with the support of technologies that did not exist at the time of the disappearance. During this reanalysis, one detail caught Andrade's attention: the mention by Jose Ferreira that Roberto had discovered something strange on his property. That information had never been thoroughly investigated. Andrade located Ferreira, now retired and living in Cuiabá, who provided more details. Roberto told me, about 2 weeks before he disappeared, that he had found strange markings on trees in an isolated area of his land, near the boundary with the neighboring property. He suspected that someone was using that area for some illegal activity, perhaps storing stolen equipment or even drugs. He said he was observing the site discreetly and collecting evidence before speaking to the authorities. This revelation changed the course of the investigation. Andrade and his team turned their attention to the former Cardoso property, now part of a much larger farm owned by the Agricola Horizonte Group. They obtained permission to examine the area described by Ferreira, particularly a dense forested section at the northern boundary of the property. In March 2006, using modern equipment and specialized sniffer dogs, the investigative team focused on a radius of about 2 kilometers from the former Cardoso house. After 5 days of meticulous searches, they discovered the remains of what appeared to be a subterranean structure, partially destroyed by time and overgrown vegetation. Excavations revealed what looked like a rudimentary bunker built with wood and concrete, measuring about 20 square meters. Inside, they found remnants of old electronic equipment, documents deteriorated by humidity, and what seemed to be a radio communication system. It was clearly a clandestine structure built to remain hidden, declared Chief Andrade in his report. Our initial hypothesis is that it served as a support point for some illegal operation, possibly linked to drug trafficking, which was beginning to intensify in the region at that time. The discovery gained even more significance when, among the partially legible documents, notes were found with geographic coordinates and codes that, after analysis, turned out to be references to possible clandestine landing sites in the border region between Brazil and Bolivia. Leave in the comments never give up on the truth if you believe that every missing person deserves to be found. The discoveries of 2006 brought a new perspective to the case, but still did not clarify the fate of the Cardoso couple. The investigation remained active, focusing on possible connections between the discovered bunker and criminal organizations operating in the region during the 1980s. Chief Andrade managed to identify and interview former members of criminal groups from that era, who, in exchange for reduced sentences for other crimes, provided valuable information. According to their testimonies, there was a drug trafficking operation that used small rural properties as support points for aircraft arriving from Bolivia. The region where the Cardosos lived was strategic due to its location and the low police presence. In 2010, a new development arose when Augusto Mendez, the landowner who had clashed with Roberto, was arrested for involvement in a money laundering operation. During the investigation of this new case, documents found in his residence mentioned payments to problem eliminators in 1984, precisely in the month of the couple's disappearance. Confronted with this evidence, Mendez continued to deny direct involvement, but admitted that he had knowledge of trafficking operations in the region and that some associates might have viewed Roberto as a threat after he discovered the bunker on his property. Cardoso was collecting evidence, taking photographs. He was a meticulous, educated man who believed in justice. Mendez declared during a 2011 interrogation, "My associates learned about this and took action. I only learned afterward what had happened, but I never knew where they were." This partial confession allowed investigators to refine their searches, now focusing on properties that had belonged to Mendez associates at the time. Among them, the Novo Horizonte farm, located about 35 kilometers from the former Cardoso property, stood out. In 1984, it belonged to Paulo Silveira, known in the region as Pauleo. Silveira had died in a plane crash in 1997, but his farm remained under family control, now managed by his son, Fernando Silveira. Originally a medium-sized property, it had expanded significantly in the following decades, becoming one of the region's largest grain producers. In January 2023, an unexpected event completely reopened the case. During the demolition of an old grain silo at the Novo Horizonte farm, set to be replaced by more modern facilities, workers made a gruesome discovery. While removing part of the concrete base, they uncovered human remains. Fernando Silveira, the current owner, immediately contacted the authorities. The Mato Grosso forensic police secured the area and began a meticulous recovery of the remains, which were in an advanced state of decomposition, but preserved by the silo's dry, sealed environment. Preliminary examinations indicated that they belonged to two people, one male and one female, who had been placed there decades earlier. Even more disturbing was the discovery that both bodies bore clear signs of extreme violence: amputated limbs, torture marks, and puncture wounds from sharp objects in what remained of the tissue. It was evident that these individuals suffered tremendously before dying, reported forensic pathologist Dr. Camila Rocha. The bodies had been dismembered, possibly to facilitate concealment, and displayed multiple antemortem traumas indicative of systematic torture. DNA analysis, compared with samples provided by Marta Cardoso, Roberto's sister, confirmed what many had long suspected. The remains belonged to Roberto and Helena Cardoso, missing for 39 years. Dating tests indicated that the deaths occurred between 48 and 72 hours after the couple was last seen, corroborating the theory that they were intercepted on the road, taken to an isolated site, tortured, then killed and hidden within the silo structure, which had been under construction at the time. Visibly shaken by the discovery on his property, Fernando Silveira fully cooperated with the investigation. He stated that he had no knowledge of his father's involvement in the case, as he was only 12 years old at the time. "I grew up seeing my father as a pioneer of agribusiness in this region, a respected man in the community," he declared in testimony. "Discovering that he may have been involved in something so horrific is devastating for me and my family, but I am committed to helping justice, even if it destroys the image I had of him." Subsequent investigations into financial records from that period, preserved in banking archives, revealed substantial transfers from Augusto Mendez to Paulo Silveira in the days immediately following the couple's disappearance. In addition, former farm workers, now elderly, began speaking out about strange events from that time. Joaquim Pereira, who worked as foreman at Novo Horizonte Farm from 1980 to 1990, reported that he and all the other workers had been dismissed from the property for an entire week in June 1984, under the pretext of a full fumigation. "When we returned, the boss was different, nervous. The silo we had been building had been hastily concreted, poorly finished. I always thought it was strange, but back then no one questioned Paleo. He was feared throughout the entire region." The confirmation of the victims' identities and the new evidence led to the formal reopening of the case as double homicide with aggravating circumstances of torture and concealment of bodies. Although the main suspects, Paulo Silveira and other direct associates, were already dead, Augusto Mendez, then 82 years old and serving house arrest for other crimes, became the main focus. In April 2023, the Mato Grosso Public Prosecutor's Office formally charged Mendez, accusing him of ordering the murders. The investigation concluded that Roberto Cardoso had in fact discovered not only the bunker on his property, but had also photographed aircraft landing on a nearby clandestine airstrip. His plan to deliver the evidence to federal authorities was uncovered by informants embedded within the agricultural cooperative. The trial of Mendez began in July 2023, attracting national attention as one of the oldest homicide cases ever brought to court in Brazil. During the hearings, several former associates of the criminal network, some now elderly and ill, testified in detail about the operation that transported cocaine from Bolivia to major Brazilian cities, using the region as a hub. On September 12, 2023, Augusto Mendez was convicted of the murders of Roberto and Helena Cardoso and sentenced to 42 years in prison. Due to his advanced age and health condition, he remained under house arrest, subject to electronic monitoring and prohibited from contacting witnesses in the case. The Cardoso case became a milestone in Brazilian criminal history, demonstrating that even after nearly 4 decades, heinous crimes can be solved and those responsible can be punished. For the victims' families, the resolution brought a painful sense of relief. "I spent 39 years imagining what could have happened to my brother and my sister-in-law," declared Marta Cardoso, now 75. "Knowing the truth, no matter how horrible it is, finally allows us to grieve properly and seek some peace." Roberto and Helena were people who believed in justice and truth. In some way, even after so much time, those values prevailed. The couple's remains were finally laid to rest in a ceremony held in Sao Paulo, their hometown, attended by family members, old friends, and even some of Helena's former students, some of whom traveled from Mato Grosso to pay their final respects. The story of the Cardoso couple inspired changes in Brazil's policies for investigating missing persons, with greater emphasis on evidence preservation and the continuation of investigations, even in long cold cases. Detective Marcelo Andrade, whose persistence was fundamental to solving the case, became a national reference in reopened investigations. The former Cardoso property, as well as the site where their bodies were discovered, became symbols of the fight against impunity. A memorial was erected in Nova Cana do Norte, honoring not only the couple but also all victims of violence and organized crime during the expansion of Brazil's agricultural frontier. The Cardoso tragedy revealed not only the brutality of a specific crime, but also shed light on a dark period in regional history, when isolation and a lack of state presence allowed criminal organizations to operate freely, eliminating anyone who posed a threat to their interests. If you've watched until now, it's because you care about cases that leave a permanent mark on families. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until now, so I can know who truly cares about the search for truth." Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends who are also interested in real cases that defy time and prove that justice, even if delayed, can finally arrive.